Something that we thought may happen and we thought it may not happen. Well, it ended up not happening. Texas has announced via athletic director Chris Del Conte yesterday they're going to keep Tom Herman. Got a lot to say about this too. We got what we expected at least. We expected definitive word to come sometime during the weekend, and it did. So Tom Herman, still the head coach at Texas. This doesn't make sense in a normal world. I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday as the news broke. He follows college football, and he said, wait a second. They made a statement. They put out what do you mean they put out a statement? I said, yeah, they put out a statement, Texas, that Tom Herman is going to remain as the head coach. He said, well, if my boss isn't going to fire me, he just expects me to show up to work Monday. Like he doesn't put out a statement saying, Billy still works here. Essentially, well, Billy does not have to recruit. Tom Herman does. And so you have to send the message because the message was already out there that they were courting other potential candidates, i.e. Urban Meyer. So now we gotta pour water on the campfire. Like, are you afraid of the dark? We got to put it out and then let the smoke billow, and you get at least one more year here. Texas, under Tom Herman, is not a 100% lost cause. I know there's a lot of doom and gloom from folks who wanted to see a move made. I understand all that. This is not a 100% guaranteed lost cause. I want to take you back, since we were talking about Auburn earlier. A lot of you know what the term Jetgate means in the world of college football. For those of you who don't, there was once upon a time a night wherein a lot of power players hopped on a private jet and flew from Auburn to Kentucky. I believe that's where they met with him. And they tried to hire Bobby Petrino right out from under Louisville and bring him back to Auburn. And it didn't work out. It leaked, and Tommy Tuberville ended up really having a lot of Teflon wrapped around him for a little while. He also went on to run off 6 in a row against Alabama, and now he's a U.S. Senator. So I'm not saying that Tom Herman couldn't turn this thing around. I'm just saying it's insanely hard when not only you know, but the whole world knows that, dude, they didn't really even want you. It's just they couldn't get the other guy, and that's the only reason you're there. The odds are just too long for me to buy into. Like, it could happen. A lot of things could happen. The most fundamental issue here, as I said, is the whole world understands what went down. It's unfortunate that they couldn't target Urban Meyer and then keep it under wraps, but I understand why that's pretty impossible. Texas doesn't want Tom Herman. That's the painful reality. We know it. He now knows it. Every recruit in America knows it, and if they don't, they'll be informed by rival staffs. And so you've got think about how many people are involved in this thing. It's a giant operation. You've got your staff there. You've got your current roster there. You've also got opposing teams that recruit against you. You've got recruits. You've got potential staff hires and potential transfers, the latter two of which you would hopefully use to right the ship. If you got to make coaching moves, how many elite coaches, assistant coaches out there are you going to convince to come into a place where they know from the day they arrive their boss is on shaky ground at best, and the only reason he's there is because they couldn't find anyone better for the time being? If you're a transfer, you want to come into that? Certainly, if you're a senior in high school, is that where you want to go? Is that the piece of paper that you want to sign? It's not hard to figure out why this is not impossible, but very difficult to see panning out. But I'm sure there's an exception out there. Like, I had someone talk to me today, and that's where the Tuberville example came up. And so there are exceptions. I'm just saying, you find me one exception out there of someone who has weathered that storm, that combination of factors, and has come out clean on the other side. I'll show you 50 to 100 who have failed miserably. Like, the road of college football is littered with the careers of guys who almost got fired, and they got close enough to being fired where the world knew how close they came, and therefore they could never salvage things. So I don't know. This seems pretty untenable at this point. But expectations being unrealistic, that's not something that I buy into at Texas. Like, we were talking about expectations at Auburn. I hear this stuff all the time about Texas having unrealistic expectations. I dismiss it entirely. Just dismiss it entirely. Again, I've said this like 5 times already, as we said with Auburn, 100% investment naturally gives you an expectation of 100% return on your investment. And as far as Texas is concerned, they're different than Auburn. Number one, because they're more established than Auburn. They got deeper pockets than Auburn. They're in an infinitely more winnable annual position than Auburn is too. All those teams I mentioned, LSU, Georgia, Alabama, they don't play any of them. And they're parked right in the middle of the state that their competition that they do have to play comes to recruit. I was talking to someone over the weekend, never thought in a million years that I'd hear someone say this, said to me, you know, Oklahoma at this point views Texas A&M as their biggest recruiting rival. Can you imagine that being the state of affairs? That's where we are right now for Texas. But your expectations at Texas, I don't think that they're irrational whatsoever. Let's just lay it out. Okay, here are the demands. For a Texas fan who's 100% emotionally and financially invested, what are the demands? It's not a national title every year. They don't expect their head coach to be Nick Saban. I've never heard a Texas fan say that. But here's what they expect. Number one, they want to dominate the Big 12 in recruiting. That should be the expectation at Texas if even an above average coach is there. Who are you competing against? Who could you explain away as being able to come into your state, which they're going to have to do to dominate you, and taking talent out of your state? Because no one in the state of Texas is going to dominate Texas in recruiting. It's not going to be TCU or Baylor. So it's going to be Oklahoma who comes in your state and takes your talent. Like, that can't be tolerated. And it's not irrational to expect to recruit the state of Texas better than Oklahoma does. That's not irrational at all. Second thing is they want to contend for the Big 12 every year. That's not irrational. There should be no 2 or 3 year rebuild. There should be no dips at Texas. There should be at Kansas State. There absolutely should be at Oklahoma State. There should never be that. This is such an, as I said, an infinitely more winnable situation. This should be, for the head coach at Texas, what Dabo has turned the ACC into at Clemson. You have one more big-time rival in Oklahoma than maybe Dabo currently does in the ACC, but otherwise, look around you. Think about how disadvantaged the rest of that world in the Big 12 is, including Oklahoma, really, relative to all the resources at your disposal. And you can't get out of your own way. That's not an expectation problem. I don't think so. The other things that they want to do is they want to be competitive in the college football playoff picture, which if you're a contender in the Big 12 year in, year out, you probably accomplish that by default. Again, not irrational at all. And they want a head coach who can get the appreciation and honor of the culture at Texas grasped. And that's what they don't have right now. And it bothers them. It bothers them to no end, and I completely understand it. I think you have to be close to the program or have grown up around that program and that culture to fully understand it, but I understand it as much as an outsider can. So I wish all the best to Tom Herman. I think he's in a pretty unwinnable position right now. So it would surprise me if this time next year we're not talking about Texas like we're talking about Auburn right now.